Storm Isha is clearing away. Storm Jocelyn is on the way. Are there any more storms to come through the rest of this week? Just what does the weather have in store? And what's Storm Jocelyn going to be like? Stronger or weaker than Storm Isha? How are we faring up so far through this year compared to average? And are we seeing more storms because of climate change? I'll try and answer all of those questions in this week's Met Office Deep Dive. Thank you so much for joining me. Very happy to be here. My name is Alex Deakin. I'm a meteorologist and weather presenter here at Met Office HQ. We're based in Exeter in Devon. If this is your first deep dive, then welcome along. I hope you enjoy it. If you've seen them all before, then you know what to expect. But we'd still really like you to hit the like button, hit that heart if you can. Give us a thumbs up as well. We really also want your comments. We do read them. We do love reading all of your comments. So please also do keep those coming in. And as a special this week, potentially we'll do it every week, but we're going to post this video about 4 o'clock. So about 4:30, half an hour after we've posted this video, I'll be around and in the comments. So keep your comments coming in. I'll try and answer. If you've got any specific questions, pop them in there. If you missed that window, don't worry, we'll still read the comments and we'll try and answer some as well. But I will be live answering some of your comments at around 4:30 this afternoon on YouTube. Because the Met Office Deep Dive is exclusive to YouTube. It doesn't go anywhere else. So yes, as I say, thank you for watching. Plenty to discuss. Before we start though, quick quiz question. Who doesn't love a quick quiz question? What do these storm names have in common? I've got a list of them. What do these storm names have in common? Again, I want your answers in the comments. 2015 was when we started naming storms. So in the season 15-16, Lawrence. In the season 16-17, Fleur. In the season 17-18, Iona. Then Idris, then Gerda, then Fleur, then Gladys in 21-22, 22-23, Killian. What do all those storm names have in common? Pop your answer in the comments and we'll see. I'll reveal all later on. But we do have two current storms to talk about and to show you. And well, the satellite picture shows them quite nicely. They've been brewing up behind me over the past couple of minutes. This was Storm Isha that smashed into the UK during the course of Sunday and into Monday. You can see that storm quite clearly here, circulation there. Moved in across the country during Sunday and brought those very strong winds through Sunday night and into Monday. Just drifted now up towards Scandinavia. And as it was still clearing Monday morning, this is Monday morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, still recording some pretty lively gusts at this stage, still 80 miles an hour on its backside across the Northern Isles on Monday morning. But at the same time, look out here. An even bigger storm in terms of its spatial extent. This is Storm Jocelyn, which is hitting the UK as I record this on Tuesday afternoon, undergoing its intensification at this stage. So while Isha was hitting the UK, Storm Jocelyn was probably at its most intense. It's a bigger storm in terms of its size, but when it comes to the UK, in terms of its intensity, in terms of its wind strength, it is going to be a notch down, and it will also be just a little bit further north. So it won't be as widespread, the gusts that we saw with Storm Isha. Let's take another look, though, at Storm Isha as it moved in, because it was a pretty interesting feature. It doesn't look much here on the satellite picture at 5 o'clock on Sunday morning, but you can see as it really spun up there and intensified during Sunday before heading its way to the north of Scotland. So the centre of the storm just passing there within that little hook just to the north of Scotland. Wind gusts from Storm Isha, pretty remarkable actually. Brisley Wood there in Northumberland, 99 miles an hour, and many other places recording gusts over 60 and 70 miles an hour. One of the key things about Storm Isha was just how widespread those gusts were from Capel Curig in North Wales. Okay, pretty exposed site, as is Needles Old Battery, but that's on the south coast, obviously, the Isle of Wight. So from the Isle of Wight all the way up to northern Scotland, we were recording these pretty lively gusts. So that's one thing about Storm Isha, how with the centre just passing to the north of Scotland, the strongest winds on its southern flank. all parts of the UK were exposed to some pretty lively gusts. How unusual is it to see these kind of numbers, 99 miles an hour? Well, some of our statistics guys have been looking and tracing back over the years. How often do we see those kind of wind gusts? And only 11 times in the past 10 years have we seen gusts of that magnitude or higher. That's kind of events. So we have seen more gusts, but if one station recorded it more than once, we counted that as one event. So 11 times in the past 10 years, and going back the past 20 years, 24 times have we seen a gust of that kind of magnitude, separate different events. So kind of happens once a year-ish to see those kind of gusts. But as I say, one of the unusual things about Storm Isha was just how widespread those gusts were. Obviously, some areas were more impacted than others, particularly across Northern Ireland and Scotland. But we did see strong winds all the way along the south coast of England also. So that's a little bit about Storm Isha. That has now cleared away, as we have seen, and all eyes are now on Storm Jocelyn as it approaches. And I say it's approaching at the moment. It's already pretty wet out there, and there is more rain to come. The winds have yet to really start to peak. They're going to really pick up now during Tuesday evening and overnight. This is a bigger storm, a more mature storm, and as I said, the winds will be a notch down. So those values we saw earlier, we're talking maybe 10, perhaps even 15 miles an hour lower, and particularly lower across the south, where we don't actually have warnings in place. I'll go through the warnings in a second, because it is just slightly shifted further north. It's not a huge difference. If you just look at the track of Isha there, and then follow that on with Storm Jocelyn, it is just now moving a little bit further north, so the low will be a little further north, but it's a more mature feature. It's undergone its most intensifying stage, and so it is a little more mature, so it isn't as potent in terms of those wind strengths. However, having said that, we do still have warnings in place because Storm Isha may well have weakened things like branches, potentially structures as well. And the winds with this Storm Jocelyn are still going to be strong. We're still going to see 70, perhaps even 80 mile an hour gusts in some locations. So it is a little further north, it is a notch down, but it is still potentially disruptive, as we will see. So there is the storm system. What is causing these storm systems is pretty easy to see. You probably know the answer if you've seen a deep dive before. You know what I'm going to show next. I'm going to show the... I just realised my computer's kind of in the way there. That's not very helpful, is it? I'll move that out of the way, then you have a better view of things. It's all to do with the jet stream, and this was the snapshot at midnight last night, and yeah, you can see a pretty potent jet stream there. You can see those darker purple colours there. That's kind of a jet streak, so a really intense line of winds within the jet. The jet, of course, that fast-moving ribbon of air high up in the atmosphere. And the jet really dictates how these low pressure systems develop. And if we just zoom in a little bit here, so this is the centre of Storm Jocelyn at midnight last night. And you can see this zone of intense, the darker purples, that's where the strongest winds are in the jet. And where it kind of weakens there, and on the left-hand side, we call that a left exit area. I did a special on jets last summer, I think, within a deep dive. You can go and search for that later. We might put the link up to it as well, all about explaining left exits and right entrances and jets. But that is an area where the pressure at the surface really starts to drop. And Jocelyn has just started to come out of this. So Jocelyn actually went through the most intense stage as we were being hit by Storm Isha, so yesterday morning, really, yesterday morning into the afternoon. So at this stage, last night, it is pretty much as deep as it's going to get. It's already reached its peak depth, if you like. And that's because it's now drifting away from this left exit area of this jet stream. If we play through the sequence, I'll just take the jet off for a second. If we play through the sequence, you can actually see that the isobars don't really pop out of it. I think we see one more developing now. So it's intensifying a little bit, but basically it's not getting any deeper that low as it approaches the UK. So it is that's what we call a more mature feature. When these systems really intensify just before they hit the UK, that's when they can really bring some very strong winds. But this one, as I say, has probably reached its most intense or just undergone that because of that interaction with the jet, and now as it approaches the UK, it's not really gaining a huge amount of strength. Having said that, look at how the isobars just squeeze together on its southern flank. That's where the strongest winds are going to be, and we'll see those moving in tonight. But the weather fronts are already across the UK, so there's quite a disparity between the rain from Storm Jocelyn and where the strongest winds are going to be. They're out here. Let's take a look at the rainfall. You can probably look at it yourself outside the window because it's pretty widespread up and down the land, and it's been raining across the west since the early hours of the morning. So the rain is moving through, and there's quite a lot of what we call orographic enhancement, where the hills enhance the rain from this weather system. So we are seeing some of the heaviest rain in this zone, northwest England and in western Scotland, along with Wales. And that's why we have the rain warnings in place for these areas, with that rain building up over the hills. Not huge amounts. A couple of reasons for that. It is moving through. But again, because we're following on from a wet spell from Storm Isha, this extra rainfall could cause some further problems. So we do have warnings in place for that rainfall. Speaking of rainfall, one thing I meant to show you earlier that I didn't. This is the rain from Storm Isha. So this is the rainfall graph through January, and you can see we started the year pretty wet. It's like a double Manhattan, if you like, there, don't you? With the towers there in the first few days. It was a very wet start to the year, and then we've hardly recorded much rainfall at all through the last couple of weeks, and then the rain has really started to pick up. And there, January the 21st, that was when Storm Isha hit and actually set a new most rainfall recorded on that day. It was the wettest 21st of January on record. That big tower there is the rainfall that accumulated from Storm Isha, and you can imagine that the 23rd is also going to be a pretty big tower coming in there with Storm Jocelyn hitting in tonight, so into the 24th. So yeah, it was also not just windy Storm Isha, but also a very wet day across the UK too. Okay, let's get back to Storm Jocelyn bringing in the rainfall, and that's why we have these weather warnings in place. I'm just going to zoom in a little bit here. A rain warning across Wales, northwest England, and across western Scotland. This is a wind warning that's already in place, covering northeast England and across the Midlands, but rain warnings for Scotland, northwest England, and Wales, because of that rain really building up over the hills. Again, no huge amounts, 40, maybe 60 millimetres of rain. That is quite a bit at low-lying areas, not a huge amount for mountains in the west. But again, because we had such a wet spell over Christmas, and because we are following on from Storm Isha, those rainfall amounts could cause some further flooding issues. So that's why we've got the yellow warning in place for those. Let's look at the wind warnings. If we fast forward to the overnight period, we have this broader yellow wind warning in place, covering the Midlands, Wales, Northern Ireland, all of Scotland, Northern England. And then we have this amber wind warning across northern and western parts of Scotland from Storm Jocelyn. That's through the night. I think it comes into play at 6 o'clock this evening and is valid until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning with these strong winds. Notice the amber warning is really around these exposed areas. So whereas with Storm Isha we had a much broader amber warning covering a significant chunk of the country, the amber warning for Storm Jocelyn is more concentrated, but this is an area that's used to seeing these kind of winds, so we wouldn't be issuing this amber warning lightly. Obviously there's still a significant risk of disruption in this amber warning area from Storm Jocelyn tonight and into first thing tomorrow morning. Likely to see bridges closed, significant risk of power issues. Trees may well come down again, and particularly, after a previous windstorm, Storm Isha, only a couple of days ago, that may have weakened structures, may have weakened trees, so an increased chance of seeing those kind of issues, flying debris as well. All of our warnings, as always, are on the website and on the app for more details of those, and you can catch our YouTube broadcasts, which also have the regular updates. That's the wind warning. Let's take a look at the winds in detail then as this storm system comes in. We've talked about the rain. Let's talk about the winds. So at time of recording, this is the ballpark picture. These are the wind gusts, that pink scale along there. The palest colour is 50 to 60 mile an hour winds, and then it goes 60, 70, 70, 80, and in 10 mile an hour slots. So just a bit of gustiness over the Welsh Mountains initially and over the northeast of Scotland, but the main event is around here. And if we just zoom out a touch, you can see the winds going round. That's where the centre of the low pressure is. That's where the centre of Jocelyn is. And as we saw earlier, with those isobars squeezing together, the strongest winds on its southern flank. Going to have kind of 3 zones, if you like, of where the strongest winds are likely to be. If we just fast forward a little bit into this evening, you may be watching this at this time. What we are going to first see, a pulse of strong winds, that section there of 70 to 80 mile an hour gusts just brushing the north coast of Northern Ireland and potentially into the west coast of Scotland and maybe even into the central belt for a time. Not likely to see 70 plus, but we could see 60 to 70 miles an hour through the central belt and certainly on the north coast of Northern Ireland in this push around about either side of midnight with those strongest winds. And then if we zoom out a touch, just fast forward a little, you can see there how those stronger winds then transfer and actually see another push up here into northern Scotland. So there's one core that hit western Scotland and then another little zone as the low is now up here, again just on its southern flank across the northern parts of the mainland and into the Northern Isles of Scotland, where again those gusts of wind could reach 70, perhaps even 80 miles an hour in exposed areas in that amber warning area. Notice also down to northern Aberdeenshire. So that is why we have that amber warning covering that zone where those gusts of wind could, in exposed areas, reach 80 miles an hour. Again, not quite as strong perhaps as it was in other areas with Storm Isha, but still, that is pretty rare even in this part of the world, and could cause some disruption. And then the third area I want to pick out is this little line here, this little line which ties into, quite nicely, the Pennines. And that is because the winds are, and we're fast forwarded right across there too. So this is Wednesday morning. So the strongest winds, the storm is actually moving away here, but notice this zone and also over the high ground, just to the lee of the high ground across southern Scotland and perhaps northeast Scotland. In this zone here, there's the Pennines, just over them and just to the east, just to the lee, we could see these strong gusts of 50, 60, maybe 65 miles an hour. And that is created, that's called lee gusts. And as the winds go over the hills, they get squeezed, and as they rush down the other side, they accelerate and can cause some strong gusts around here. Try and do a demo of that. So you've got the mountains. If I draw a picture here, say this is the Pennines in cross-section here. What's happening as the storm system clears away is the air is actually stabilising, and what we see just above in the skies, just above the top of the mountains, this is called an inversion, a temperature inversion, and that's dropping down and the air is stabilising. So we have the winds, the red lines, the red arrows here are the winds, they get pushed up the hill. These winds don't get pushed because they're going that way anyway. So you get this cross section, you get these winds and they get squeezed together because they can't rise up through the atmosphere because the air's very stable up here. And what happens is they get squeezed through, you're pushing that air through a smaller gap, and as it then comes down the other side, it really accelerates and creates strong gusts on the other side. So that is what we call lee gusts, and that's what we're going to see with these winds coming in during the course of tonight and particularly tomorrow morning. So although the storm itself by this stage, by 11 o'clock Wednesday morning, will be clearing away and the strongest winds in here in the North Sea, we could still have these gusts, particularly to the east of the hills and mountains in eastern Scotland and to the east of the Pennines there as well. So that's another area we're watching. So kind of 3 zones that we're particularly concerned about with Storm Jocelyn and the winds coming in. Any answers to that quiz question I set you earlier? Keep them coming in the comments. A quick reminder, if you missed it at the start, what do these storm names have in common? From the 15-16 season, Lawrence; from 16-17, Fleur; from 17-18, Iona; 18-19 Idris; 19-20 Gerda; 20-21 Fleur again; 21-22 Gladys; 22-23 Killian. What do those storm names have in common? Keep your answers coming in the comments. Okay, so that's Storm Jocelyn moving through. We've seen the rainfall. Going to be pretty heavy in the west, but it all kind of clears away. And then Wednesday, we are this kind of situation. We've got a few showers coming into Scotland. Quite a bit of sunshine, actually. Just a bright and breezy day for many. There is a weather front coming into the south. And if we take a look at the broader picture, are we going to see any more of these storms coming in? Well, the answer to that, in short, is probably not in the shorter term. The jet stream remains pretty lively as it pushes Storm Jocelyn away. But if we go back to where it was, a really concentrated line here, fast forward, and it's starting to split, it's starting to weaken. Fast forward through to Thursday, and it's still got that kind of split in it. So there's still a reasonably potent jet. There is still a trough in here. We are still seeing low pressure systems, but they're starting to be pushed a little bit further north. And as we head further on into Friday and into the weekend, now, if you take the jet stream off, look at this. We've actually got high pressure starting to move in across certainly the southern half of the UK. So for the rest of this week, the pattern is going to kind of establish itself like this, with high pressure building in. So if we go back to where we are, there is high pressure to the south, but it's much further to the south and allowing the lows coming into the north, Jocelyn there in particular. But fast forward to Saturday, and the whole pattern has just shifted north because the jet stream has shifted north. So we've now got this high pressure moving in across the south. High pressure is where the air is generally sinking, and that will bring some drier weather. Still quite windy, still a lot of isobars across northern Britain as we go into the weekend. So still quite windy here, and there will be some rain around as well. But generally speaking, the strongest winds, the storm track, if you like, is being pushed a little further north. And this setup actually looks like persisting into most of next week. So once we get this set up with higher pressure to the south and the low pressure to the north, that may well last for most of next week as well. That's what's being signalled by a lot of our computer model projections. This is the European model showing the pressure anomaly for next week. So this is the week commencing 29th of January. This is the pressure anomaly, so how different it is from usual, and it's averaged over the whole 7 days. So from the 29th until the first Monday of February. I can't work that out. The 5th, I do know that. So this is showing that the pressure across to the south of the UK and into France is likely to be high. So that setup that we had a minute ago, higher, likely to persist, and lower pressure, the green, tealy colours further north. So pressure lower than average up here. And with the winds around low pressure going anti-clockwise and the winds around high pressure going clockwise, that all means the winds are going to be coming in from this direction. So we are going to see westerly winds dominate our weather from the end of this week, and for most of next week it looks like westerly winds bringing air in from the Atlantic, and that means reasonably mild but also reasonably moist. So that would, if you imagine, with westerly winds, you'd expect western areas to see more rainfall. And if we look at the rainfall anomaly map for the same time, again, this is from ECMWF, the European model, averaged over that whole week compared to the average for this time of year. Green is wetter than average, and brown, orange is drier than average. You can see there that much wetter than average, and this is, it's a wet part of the world, Western Scotland, but even wetter than average for that whole week. And it's other western areas, Northern Ireland, northwest England, parts of Wales, whereas further south it's generally white, so very close to average. And that's because you're closer to the high pressure where the air is generally sinking. So it is likely to turn a lot drier across the south. It's dry compared to, so it's around about average, and it's January, so there will be some rain. It's not completely dry, but drier, whereas those western areas will bear the brunt of those western winds, which means it will be generally a bit milder than average, but also a little bit wetter than average as well, with those westerly winds setting up. Pretty sure it's Aidan doing the 10-day trends tomorrow, and he will have a lot more on that and the details of the weather as we go through next week. What could that do to our January average? We saw earlier how Storm Isha brought a lot of rainfall, but obviously we haven't seen a great deal of rainfall for the past couple of weeks. Been dominated by high pressure after what was a pretty wet start to January. So this is showing the rainfall amount cumulatively as we've been through the month and the year so far. The days are along the bottom here. So for the first few days it was pretty wet. This black line here is the average line. And these are the extremes. This orangey red line here is the most rainfall, and the blue line at the bottom is the least rainfall we've ever recorded in a January month. And this thicker blue line is where we've been so far through this year. So accumulatively through the year. And the first week was wetter than average. Well, actually the first 2 or 3 days was significantly wetter than average. And then since, what's that, the 4th of January, we pretty much flatlined, recording very little rainfall across the country as a whole for 2 weeks. And then the rain has returned again, and we saw a really big jump, obviously, with that rainfall from Isha on the 21st. So that saw a big jump. We are likely to see a similar kind of jump with Jocelyn, which you can imagine is going to take us back close to that average rainfall amount. And, you know, so we'll be back much closer to the average after today, really, once those stats are in, and probably going to track pretty close to that average line, I'd have thought, for the rest of the month, given that we're going to see westerly winds with higher pressure to the south. What about temperature-wise? Well, you probably noticed it's been cold, but the start of the month was very, very warm. So this is kind of showing the same thing, but with temperatures. So cumulatively, as we've been through the month, with that orange line there, the warmest January on record. This is the coldest January on record. This is the average line here, and this is the current month. So we started the month, the mean temperature, so averaged over the whole day across the whole country. By the 3rd, we were 2 degrees above the average, more than 2 degrees above the average. Since then, we have been dropping off, and what's that, 3 or 4 days ago, we were close to 2 degrees below the average for January. But we've started to track back up, and again, with westerly winds, we would anticipate that things will be generally milder than average over the next few days, so we'll probably track close to, and particularly today is a pretty mild day as well, despite all the rain. So you'd imagine we'll track closer to that average line as we go through towards the end of the month. So that'll be interesting to see where we end up with January. As always, let's just have one more close look at Jocelyn as it moves in. So that's the strongest winds there on that southern flank of the low as it comes in. So the strongest winds are tonight and into tomorrow. Let me answer that question that I posed you earlier, because I know you're interested. Thanks for the comments. If you have put a comment in, I will check in a minute. Once I've done this, I'm going to be checking. So the question was, what did storms Lawrence in 15-16, Fleur in 16-17, etc., all the way through to Killian last year, what do they have in common? Well, they were the storms that never were. They were the next names that we didn't get to. So Storm Lawrence in 15-16, that would have been the next storm, but we stopped at Katie in 15-16. That was the last named storm of that season. Fleur didn't get on in 16-17, and Fleur also we stopped short of in 20-21. So they were the names that we didn't quite get to in each of those years. And I pick out Lawrence there, the first one, because we did get to K in that first year we named storms, and we're obviously not far behind now. We're already up to Jocelyn, we're already up to J. Kathleen will be next, and if we do name Kathleen, then that will tie with the record. Now I say record, there's been a lot of chat about are we seeing more storms, and well, the Met Office have written a blog about that today, so you can go and search that up. We might even again put the link in the comments, so you can go and read it for yourself, because there's been a lot of chat around about whether we are seeing more storms or not, and whether that's linked to climate change. But we've only named storms for the past 8 years, so it's you're not really getting a big enough field to be comparing for a start. When we talk about climate, we're talking about decades, if not many decades. So looking at a small sample size isn't very useful, particularly with something that has such variability as storms. We didn't name a storm for 18 months, from February 22 to August last year, and we've named 12 since then, since August last year. So there is a huge variability, a natural variability, so it's hard to pin down and track trends. We can, though, look at wind storms, not just necessarily named ones. We've got the records going back many, many decades. And of course, just naming a storm doesn't necessarily mean it was the strongest wind or the deepest low pressure system, because we name storms based on their impact. So a deep low that generates 70 or 80 miles an hour winds across northern Scotland in the middle of the night in February wouldn't necessarily get a name, but a similar storm further south that happened in October when the trees were in leaf in the middle of the day may get a name. So you're not just by looking at what's named or what's not named, you're not really comparing things properly. But we can go back, because we're the Met Office, we've got all the data, we can actually compare pressure systems and look back, and there isn't a significant trend. You can't really pick out a trend over recent decades about whether we're seeing more or less. Most computer projections do suggest in the future that we will see slightly more winter storms and of slightly more intensity as well. So they are likely to be slightly stronger and more frequent winter storms going. But that is an area of ongoing research. It's far from conclusive. What we can say is that with our warming climate, a warmer climate carries more moisture, so when we see extreme rainfall events like we do with these storms, they're likely to be bringing more rainfall because there's more energy, there's more warmth in the atmosphere, so the rain may well be heavier. And another thing we can say is that often storm systems like these deep low pressure systems will create a storm surge and raise the water level, and because of climate change we know that sea levels are rising as well, so that does then indicate there's a higher chance of flooding around coasts from these storm systems when they come in as well. So go and read our blog about that. It's been posted today. Much more on that in there. And of course, by naming them, it's one of the things, it triggers people. That's the point. That's why we name them, because we want to raise awareness of this severe weather that's coming in. And actually, you could argue that it's just us doing a better job of naming than raising people's awareness, that people may think there has been more. We are enduring something of a stormy season at the moment. As I said, we've not been this far, this deep into the season, but even going back a couple of years, before we started naming, 2013 into 14 was also a particularly stormy year. So again, just comparing since we started naming isn't particularly useful. Okay, hope that was good. Thank you for all your comments. Do please keep them coming in. As I said, I am hoping to be in the comments at around about 4:30. So if you've got any more questions, it could be about anything really, then get in the comments and I will try and answer some of your questions in there. But thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this week's deep dive. Please do hit the like button. It does make a big difference to us. Hit the like button. Share this with anyone you know that may be interested in weather. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you doing? Do hit the subscribe button and then you'll never miss a Met Office deep dive. Thanks for watching.